Republican Party leadership announced their commitment to America. The agenda last Friday in Pennsylvania. They provided a plan that helps average working Americans with a focus on the economy, crime, and illegal immigration that is flooding across our borders. Here was President Biden responding to the commitment to America on Friday at an event.
Democracy will be on the ballot. Americans will have to choose between the MAGA Republican platform, who have embraced extremism and the big lie, Democrats, independents, and mainstream Republicans who believe in the rule of law. Rejecting the will of the people and accepting the results of a fair and free election is what we're about, not what they're about.
So what is this extreme Republican platform that the president says threatens our democracy, or more accurately, our republic? Is it the parental rights that they're advocating for? Protecting the unborn, maybe? Religious freedom? These are threats to the country? I guess so, in the mind of the president and his administration. Joining me now to discuss this and more is Congressman Mike Johnson. He serves on the House Judiciary Committee and the House Armed Services Committee. He represents the 4th Congressional District of my home state of Louisiana. Congressman Johnson, welcome back to the program.
Hey, Tony, great to be with you as always.
I want to get into the issue of the vaccine because you've spoken to the military about that. But first, before we get to that, I want to talk about the commitment to America and that plan. I had our good friend Steve Scalise on the program Friday after it was introduced. We talked about it. Why is this what the country needs as we head into the midterms?
Well, we've been really excited, anxious to roll this out. You know, there are a lot of things to rail against right now. There's a crisis at every turn. You and I have talked about this frequently, and the American people talk about it around their kitchen table. The Biden administration has made a mess of everything. The Democrat-led Congress has made a mess of everything. So we can go out and curse the darkness and talk about all the problems, and we should highlight those. But what's really important is for us to say what we're for. And not unlike the contract with America that everybody remembers fondly from the mid-'90s when Newt Gingrich and the Republicans took control of the House for the first time in 40 years, we rolled out the commitment to America. And we're talking about basic common sense commitments that I think the American people demand and deserve of us. And that is to make a nation that is safe, a nation that's free, a nation that's secure, and a government that's accountable. And when I'm around Louisiana, Tony, or around the country at events for other candidates and incumbents that are going to be reelected this fall, these are the things we hear, the common refrain we hear from the people. They want it, and this has been very, very well received.
So Mike, we hear, just now, we hear the president talking about these things. All of a sudden, this is the party that wanted to defund the police, and now they're talking about promoting the police as their crime has gotten out of control. There's barely an inch of America that has not become affected by the lawlessness that they unleashed 2 years ago. So how does the American public buy what they're selling, knowing what they have delivered in the last 2 years?
No one does. They're operating in a fantasy world. You know, you heard a little clip of the president's response to our rollout of the commitment to America yesterday. Of course, as usual, he's reading verbatim from a teleprompter that some staffer wrote. The president's not seen anything that we've rolled out. I'm not sure that he would understand it anyway. These are talking points that are not based in reality, and everybody can see that. You can go out and tell people that they're not struggling financially, that they're not having a hard time making ends meet, that the cost of living has not gone up, but they know that that's not true. You can tell them that the border is secure, as they keep saying over and over, and everyone can see that that is obviously not true. You can say that the crime is under control and that they support the police, but there's this long record of all of them, from the president on down, and the top leaders of Congress, who have been on record saying they wanted to defund the police, disrespect law enforcement. Well, this is what it's raw. So I think the American people have the receipts. They have their number. They know that who's responsible for this, and I think that they're going to let their voices be heard in a big way on November 8th.
So, Congressman Johnson, I want to talk about a couple of the issues that are viewers and listeners care about. You and I have talked about these issues. You've campaigned on them. You've actually worked to legislate on them. Both of us have. And that's the issue of the sanctity of human life. It is a part of the commitment, the protection of the unborn and their mothers. Religious freedom is a part of this commitment. Education, of course, religious freedom touches on so many things today as the left has been pushing their ideology. But I want to play a clip of the vice president who was campaigning in Wisconsin. The left is really campaigning hard on abortion, all right? And I know that in the wake of Dobbs, the landscape has changed. And so some Republicans are afraid to talk about this issue. I still think this is an issue that our voters care deeply about, and they need to know that the Republicans' commitment remains firm on this. But I want you to respond to this clip. Let me play this clip of Vice President Harris, clip 3, please.
You don't have to change your faith or abandon your faith or your deeply held beliefs to agree. The government should not be telling a woman what to do with her body.
Mike, is that not an affront to every Bible-believing Christian in America?
Well, clearly it is, and it shows that the Vice President of the United States has no understanding of the basic doctrines of our Judeo-Christian heritage. The fundamental tenets of the Christian faith is that we believe, of course, that we're all made in the image of God, that He knew us before we were formed in our mother's womb. He knows the number of hairs on the top of our head, every thought and meditation of our heart. He has a great plan for each of our lives. This is a personal relationship we have with our Creator. The founders of our country acknowledged that, by the way. They said all of us are created equal. They thought that was a self-evident truth, not born equal, created equal. So for her to just kind of wave her hand and dismiss the views of what is still, I think, the vast majority of Americans just shows how completely out of touch they are. They care not about the rights of conscience, about the sincerely held religious beliefs of most Americans if it gets in the way of their political agenda. And as you noted, Tony, so importantly, the contrast between our position and our view and theirs is so stark. I mean, the Democrats have voted in this Congress, of course, on legislation that would authorize and allow for the slaughter of an unborn child, for the termination of a pregnancy, all the way up to the very moment of birth. This is not hyperbole. It's in the legislation, and everyone can see that for themselves. So this is a choice in this election between those who would regard and protect the sanctity of every single human life and those who have no regard for it at all.
Well, and Congressman, their legislation goes farther than that. As you know, it would eliminate most common sense state provisions that are out there all across this country, whether it be parental notification, ultrasound laws. All of these would be wiped away by the Democrats' measure that, if I'm not mistaken, it actually has passed the House twice, waiting in the Senate. They voted on it, haven't passed it. It is a concern for the lame duck. I think that it could come back. But I just had last week on my program Robert Kahali with Trafalgar. The polling on this, 60% of Americans support where the Republicans on this, reasonable approaches to protecting the unborn, only 40%. And this is after 40% support the Democrats' radical position, but that's after all that's been done through the media.
As much as the media and the Democrats try to obscure the issue, it really is simple. Do we value the sanctity of every single human life? That really is on the ballot this fall. They're right about that part, but you have to choose which side you're on. And the other side is advancement of, as we said, abortion to the very end. And they're not just going to codify Roe, Tony. They're going to go further than Roe because they'll of course get rid of the whole trimester framework and all the rest of it. So it's a stark contrast.
Yeah, and folks need to understand that it's not about, well, okay, so they're going to maintain status quo. They want abortion on demand until the moment of birth and beyond, as we've seen in some cases, in every state across the nation, no restrictions, and Americans paying for it. So you're right. Abortion is on the ballot, among many other issues. Security, the border security, crime, inflation. I mean, what is not messed up under this administration? But I want to go to this topic because you addressed it last week. You sent a letter. You led a letter from you and several of your colleagues to the Secretary of the Army, Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, regarding the vaccine. I mean, we now have plenty of evidence that the vaccine is not very effective. The president himself declaring the pandemic is over. We have a deficit of recruiting in the Army. We're about to kick out tens of thousands of healthy men and women. Why? What's going on here?
I wish I could answer that question. We have been seeking that answer earnestly, as you know, for months. And as you said, most recently last week, after the president himself declared that the pandemic is over, why in the world would the leadership of our military continue with this ridiculous vaccine mandate? You know, Tony, you have to recognize that, first of all, this is the worst recruiting year in the history of the United States military since we've been keeping the records on all this. We are way below the target number for the year, about half of what is necessary to maintain the military, to maintain the status quo. And the reason is very simple.
Okay, go ahead. I'm going to ask you that. Give us the reason that they're only meeting 52% of their goal in recruiting.
Yeah, it's not rocket science. This is very simple. It's the vaccine mandate. They have eliminated, just out of the gates, about 40% of the prospective recruits. You know, 18 to 25-year-old males is the target demographic. Well, about 40% or more of them, depending on which part of the country you're in, have chosen not to be vaccinated. And so they are eliminated. They cannot be recruits to the U.S. military. So that is having a huge negative effect, obviously, on recruiting.
But doesn't the science say that that demographic really doesn't need the vaccine?
Right. Let's follow the science, right? That's what they tell us all the time. And we keep pointing out that that very demographic is the one that is least at risk from COVID, even at the height of the pandemic. And so, I mean, these are obvious facts. They're backed up by the science, but the leadership of the military pays no attention to it. And it is so harmful to the country. We live in a very dangerous time. I mean, I'm stating the obvious here. We have terrorists and tyrants who are, flexing their muscles all around the world, from China to Russia to Iran, North Korea. We need our military to be operating at full readiness capacity, and we need every recruit we can get. And so to use this technicality to prevent persons who want to serve is just outrageous. And by the way, you have the current men and women who are in the military, 100,000, about 100,000 of our soldiers and military service persons are subject to be discharged from the military right now. And they've not told us yet what they're going to do about that either. So it is just an incredible situation. It defies common sense, and there really is no obvious reason for it.
Now, Congressman Johnson, I know you've heard from many of your constituents. I've heard from young men and women who are being thrust out of the military because they will not get the vaccine. Is there a chance, will we see, if the Republicans gain control of Congress, that we could see these men and women, a reversal where they could be brought back into the military after they've been pushed out under these conditions?
That is certainly going to be a goal of ours. And our commitment to America, one of the primary pillars is a nation that's safe. And obviously, you've got to maintain your military to do that. And of course, it's an essential and fundamental value of ours as Americans to protect the right of conscience, the right to our sincerely held religious beliefs. Many of the persons who decided not to be vaccinated did it for religious reasons, and none of those exceptions have been granted. A very small handful. There's been litigation over that you've covered and we've talked about, and some of that litigation has been successful, but not enough. And much of it is still on appeal. So yes, if a Republican-led Congress, if we get the gavels back, this is going to be a top priority of ours, because we must do it to keep the country safe. This is not a game. We should not be playing politics with the military. We should not be pursuing political agendas. We should be keeping the people safe, and that's in jeopardy right now.
One of those that signed the letter with you, Congressman Thomas Massie, said that the religious exemption process is a fraud.
Yeah, because all of the information that we've been working to gather in the House Armed Services Committee and House Judiciary, House Oversight, leads us to that conclusion that there's not a lot of rational thought that's gone into these big decisions, obviously, and the whole system itself seems to be fraught with error, if not outright fraud. They should be allowing exemptions for good reason. They should be listening to their soldiers. I mean, you have top officers in the military who've been affected by this. Navy SEALs. You know how much money it takes to train and equip Navy SEAL? You can't put out a help wanted sign and just recruit new ones overnight. I mean, this is serious business, and it's putting our nation in jeopardy. And you know who's laughing about it the whole time? China, Russia, Iran,
Yeah.
North Korea, all of our adversaries. It's a dangerous thing.
Our wokeness is playing right into their hands. Congressman Mike Johnson, always great to see you. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you, my friend. Great to see you.